This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Our democracy.
Our democracy.
Our democracy.
It's time for another Gamerant video essay with some memes on the side. And in this video, I actually want to cover a somewhat recent event and how it's a really great example of an extremely common contradiction we see in the authoritarian woke. A really big contradiction that for some reason none of them seem to realize how crazy they sound to anyone who's aware of it. And that contradiction, of course, is people who claim to believe in democracy, but at the same time do not really believe in free speech. They somehow are completely unaware of how obviously contradictory this is and hilariously stupid they sound to anyone with common sense. The result of this is, of course, that they talk about our democracy from a purely selfish standpoint. When they say our democracy, they mean their democracy, not your democracy. And this time I will be playing some Touhou, which this is actually a very well done NES port of Touhou 7. Plus, I'd like to show some few things in this video that require a bit more room, and y'all probably don't care about my score, so I'll just be taking the liberty of using the extra space there. Anyways, the recent event in question is of course Elon Musk's Twitter deal, which has now officially gone through in case you didn't get the memo. No, really, I'm pretty sure most people probably know this by now. You probably know the Twitter deal has gone through. They went kind of back and forth on it, blah, blah, blah. First Musk wanted to buy it, then didn't want to buy it, then Twitter forced him to buy it, then he wanted to buy it, then Twitter didn't want to sell it. Now they finally accepted the fact that they were both acting insane, and so now he bought Twitter. 100% done deal. Elon Musk now owns Twitter, and he's already settling in, and he's already fired a few top executives. Don't really care about that part. The more important part is that Musk has actually laid out what his basic plans for the site are for advertisers, which gives some insight to his overall plans for the site in the future. I'll read the relevant part real quick here. Dear Twitter advertisers, I wanted to reach out personally to share my motivation in acquiring Twitter. There has been much speculation about why I bought Twitter and what I think about advertising. Most of it has been wrong. The reason I acquired Twitter is because it is important to the future of civilization to have a common digital town square, where a wide range of beliefs can be debated in a healthy manner without resorting to violence. There is currently great danger that social media will splinter into far right-wing and far left-wing echo chambers that generate more hate and divide our society. In the relentless pursuit of clicks, much of traditional media has fueled and catered to these polarized extremes, as they believe that it is what brings in the money, but in doing so, the opportunity for dialogue is lost. That is why I bought Twitter. I didn't do it because it would be easy, I didn't do it to make more money, I did it to try to help humanity, whom I love. And I do so with humility, recognizing that failure in pursuing this goal, despite our best efforts, is a very real possibility. That said, Twitter obviously cannot become a free-for-all hellscape where anything can be said with no consequences. In addition to adhering to the laws of the land, our platform must be warm and welcoming to all, where you can choose your desired experience according to your preferences, just as you can choose, for example, to see movies or play video games ranging from all ages to mature. And then he says some extra things about advertisement, but I don't really care about that, and you probably don't either. The point here is that doesn't really seem too far right or far left. That seems relatively middle of the road. If you go back maybe 20 years in the past with the United States and say something like that, most people would assume that to be relatively sane. And there's definitely still going to be some kind of content moderation. That is one thing that needs to be put out here. Just a fair warning to the people who are currently spamming, the gamer words on Twitter. You are probably eventually still going to get banned for that, or at the very least shadow banned in some way, like algorithmic restrictions, or people will have the option to just completely auto block you from them being able to see you or something like that. You probably won't be able to spam anything on Twitter you want. So I don't see this as some hard far right move by Elon Musk at all. Definitely a move towards the right, but that's of course is only because it was previously at the far left. And it'll most likely will not result though in Twitter becoming a clone of Gab. And honestly, that's probably a good thing, since if you want to enjoy Gab's kind of content in social media platforms, go to Gab and you can enjoy the Gab style of anything goes content over at Gab. That's kind of a thing that a lot of people don't seem to realize, is that you don't want there to be one town square. I'm sure Elon Musk might want that since he owns it now and he wants to turn a profit out of it, or so he says, or either way, I mean, he likes money. He's gonna try and profit out of somehow. However, when it comes to Gab, it's better to have some kind of competition. Anyways, how is woke Twitter taking this? Well, the answer, of course, is that they are absolutely freaking out. I did a search and found all manner of people having a cow fit over how they think that this somehow means democracy is over. Oh no, it's over because one of the big tech giants might no longer be censoring political opinions that I no longer agree with. Therefore, democracy is over. I can't censor my political opponents anymore. Oh boy. Oh boy. So I specifically looked at people using the phrase "our democracy," which in their mind I guess means where everyone votes within their narrowly defined box of so-called facts. The people saying this phrase are of course not actually concerned about democracy at all. They might think that they have. They may think they are, due to cognitive dissonance and all that, but they are really just upset that they are losing control of said box of allowed acceptable discourse. They are afraid they might lose control of the narrative, and thus their power that it comes with. And thus, when you see these establishment figures say something is a threat to our democracy, they either do not truly believe what it is they are saying, or they are just legitimately too dumb to understand why democracy without free speech is invalid and self-contradictory. No, really, just look at some of these people. They really do seem to believe that the sky is falling now that Twitter is no longer their free hug box. So I'm just going to read a few of these to just go over the fun tweets that I have found in favor of the democracy. First up, we got Russia is happy all round that Elon Musk owns Twitter. They broke the news early in the morning and their latest is their Kremlin shill Trump. Orange Man Bad getting his account back to plan more operations to attack our democracy. This is sickening. I guess allowing politicians you don't like, it goes against your democracy. I don't even know what to say on that one. I guess it kind of goes double down on them thinking that everything they dislike is just Russian propaganda, but it doesn't actually work like that, sorry. Also, you'll still technically be allowed to combat what you think is misinformation after Elon Musk's takeover. You just won't have the Twitter cathedral doing it for you. You can still make your own websites and organize against what you consider to be misinformation to fight against what you think is misinformation. You just can't force it down other people's throats. Next up, if you're livid that Elon Musk is using his power at Twitter to attack our democracy with conspiracy theories, follow Democratic strategist at Cliffshatcher so you don't miss his biting commentary on how we must defeat Elon's plans, win the election. Again, no, that's not what democracy actually is. Seriously, these people seem to think that democracy is when the establishment censors in your favor. It doesn't work like that. Or at least it's not supposed to work like that. Elon Musk, the man who now owns Twitter, is also a conspiracy theorist. This sickness runs deep in America and is ruining our democracy. No, it's just ruining her democracy. If you believe that this is a conspiracy theorist, and if you register a conspiracy theory, if you don't agree with Elon Musk, then just post your information and your facts and your evidence for why you think Elon Musk is in the wrong here. It doesn't mean that your democracy is over. America has a political violence crisis threatening to burn down our democracy, and now Elon is going to pour gasoline all over it. Again, remember what Elon Musk actually said for his views for Twitter earlier. He didn't actually say anything in regards to making Twitter some kind of far-right zone like these people seem to think. I guess in their minds, they've just gotten so used to the privilege of Twitter censoring in their favor that when taking that privilege away from them, they're now just freaking out and thinking that it's the end of everything. And there are tons and tons and tons of other tweets like this. I don't need to go over every single one of them because, I mean, you can just search for them yourself. Just search our democracy in the last 5 days or so, or a few weeks if you really want to get thousands of results. I think I've kind of shown the point and shown the problem here quite clearly. All of these people are, of course, committing basically the same fallacy. They are associating their loss of power or their perceived loss of power as a loss of democracy. Of course, that's not actually a loss of democracy, that's just a loss of their power. So it's basically just a massive fallacy of relevance that we're seeing here. And they seem to think that if they say our democracy, our democracy, our democracy enough times, then it somehow becomes a relevant argument. Nope, sorry, not how it works. It's just not how it works, sorry. Anyways, those who are not new to my channel are aware that I usually focus all my content on refuting something, and that's not going to be different here. I just wanted to focus something more on a recent event and more or less just calling out something that is totally nonsensical that a lot of people are saying. And for this specific event, I would like to focus on some of the arguments these people give in favor of their freakout over thinking a more open internet platform is somehow dangerous to their democracy. And there are generally 3 arguments I see in favor of this kind of thinking coming from these people. Now, the first of them is that they just don't understand why democracy needs free speech to be valid. Now, honestly, if you actually unironically come across someone who thinks this, someone who legitimately does not understand why they need to believe in free speech if they claim to believe in democracy, you honestly shouldn't debate or argue with someone like that, because some arguments are just so obvious and so intuitive that if someone doesn't get it, chances are that they probably aren't able to get it. It's not an issue of they don't get it, it's an issue of they are unable to comprehend, period. So no matter how you explain it to them, they're still not going to get it. But anyway, it's a very obvious reason. If you do not have free speech, they will only be allowed to talk within the information of whatever the establishment says, which means that democracy effectively just becomes a dictatorship of the establishment by proxy. It's not valid at all without free speech. If you believe in democracy, you have to believe in free speech. Sorry, period. End this discussion right there. So do not try to debate anybody who doesn't understand that one. Anyway, and then the second and somewhat more sane argument, this is the argument that people will use if they actually have some idea of what they're talking about, is that democracy will die if the spread of misinformation is allowed. Now, but it's actually more or less a criticism of democracy itself rather than a criticism of the misinformation. And that's actually a problem of democracy, is that if you have misinformation, then the people who effectively control the media can control what is going on in a democracy. So that's actually an argument against democracy. So this is not something that can be fixed by saying, oh, just ban misinformation, because in order to actually do that, you need a ministry of truth to decide what is and what is not misinformation. And history has shown that, of course, people in charge of that do not always do a good job. They often are very corrupt about it. They often ban things that are true, claiming that they are false, and then they later turn out to be true. Good example of this, just from the leftists on Twitter we see, was the Hunter Biden laptop leak. That later turned out to be true, even though it was heavily censored. And so now these same people are claiming that, oh no, Twitter needs to ban misinformation. Twitter has a record of not exactly getting misinformation correct. Now these people are whining about my democracy, which just further proves my point. When they're saying our democracy, they don't actually mean your and their democracy. They just mean their democracy, not your democracy. They're just whining because they're no longer in control of the Ministry of Truth. So there is absolutely zero intellectual honesty going on with these people. But anyway, misinformation is subjective. Who defines what is misinformation? The answer, of course, is the people in charge. And then you can't objectively define misinformation. You can't actually outright ban what is misinformation, because then it just means whoever's in charge of the narrative gets to decide what democracy is. Just read the book The Myth of the Rational Voter if you're more interested in this problem, but it is more or less a criticism of democracy itself that they are misunderstanding, mainly because voters don't really have an incentive to really find out the truth, since people's votes at the end of the day don't really have that high of an impact on whether or not their policies that they want actually get implemented. Another excellent book on this subject is The God That Failed by Hans Hermann Hoppe. The reality is that true democracy isn't actually a good system, as it allows people who are completely ignorant, clueless, misinformed, and in some cases, they don't even really care about a subject that they're having a say in. And by letting them have a say in it, it just degrades the input of people who are actually knowledgeable about the subject being voted on. And the founding fathers of the United States also knew this, hence why the US is a representative republic backed by an electoral college and not a true democracy. And that's a good thing, which just further goes to show that these people whining about Musk on Twitter and whining about our democracy are really just accidentally admitting that democracy isn't actually that great. So the last argument is, of course, hate speech. This pretty much has the same problem as the last one. Who exactly gets to define hate speech? I mean, sure, you can have a law that kind of gives some guidelines for what you consider hate speech and what you don't consider hate speech, but ultimately it's the people in charge who are going to be able to decide what is and what isn't hate speech. It's whoever is interpreting that law that is going to decide what speech is allowed and what is not, because the reality is hate speech is also subjective. There's no objective way to define what is hate speech at any given moment, at any given time, in all circumstances, in all contexts, in all situations. It's just not logically possible to do. People have tried, they have failed at it miserably every single time. You cannot objectively define hate speech, and thus it is simply left up to whoever the Ministry of Truth is to decide what is and what isn't allowed. And this is very common. You ask a leftist or a woke-toid to define objectively what hate speech is, they can't do it. They'll give you a subjective definition every single time without fail. And it's honestly pretty sad, because if you think about it, the correct answer to hate speech and how to deal with it would be freedom of association. And this is actually something that Elon Musk could think about. It's something that would make perfect sense in Twitter on a social media platform, as people could go in their own user settings and choose and define what they consider to be the correct facts or the correct hate speech. Like they could have a little toggle that they could check on as don't show posts from people who use racial slurs, which is probably one of the few things that you can actually somewhat objectively call hate hate speech, but then it's very limited to just specific words, and they're mean and make people feel bad. Which, of course, is also subjective. What do you consider to be the slurs you don't like? Which ones are acceptable? Because there was actually a really big argument about that coming from the left these days, of whether or not there are slurs that you could use against, say, white people that should be banned or not. And of course, they argue over that. People don't actually agree on what is hate speech, and they don't actually agree on what those nasty words are. It's all, again, completely subjective, so you can't really justify using force to ban it. The reality here is, anyone upset by Musk buying Twitter for these reasons doesn't actually believe in democracy at all. They might claim that they believe in democracy, they say it with their words that they very truly believe in democracy, but if you push what they're saying to its logical conclusions, they don't actually believe in democracy. Anyway, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, subscribe, and all that stuff. Till next time.